Today I want to talk about mediumship guides and the concept of calling cards. So starting with calling cards, what that is, what people are talking about when they say that is a physical sensation, something you actually feel. This doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to a lot of people and it's different for everybody. Initially, when I first started to do this, so what was neat is this was happening to me before I knew about what a calling card was. I was doing practice circles for a few months before I read in a book about calling cards. I'm like, oh, that's happening to me. So initially what it was is, I've said this in other videos, if you turn on an overhead light, if that had a sense of a weight, if the light had a very gentle sense of weight, that's what it used to feel like for me. And then pretty soon after that, it sounds weird, but it happens every time I'm connect. They flex my feet. If I'm wearing shoes, I can feel my toes go like that. If I've got my feet out in front of me, I see my toes do that. I'm not doing it. I watch it happen. I know this is a throwback to when I was a child. My earliest expression of mediumship was, I used to call it following my feet, and I would find people or I would find missing objects. It was a game I used to play with my mom when we were at the mall. So I used to call it finding my feet, and they're still using my feet as an indicator that they're with me, basically. So that's my calling card. This is not a required thing. If it's not happening to you, don't worry about it. It's different for everyone. And I will say it may be happening to you and you don't realize yet what it is, because it may be it's commonly a physical sensation that you feel. So not a requirement. The thing is, this was happening to me for months before it occurred to me to question, who's doing this? Like, who's making that heavy feeling? Or who's making my feet contract? So, and it was the same way, it is the same way every time. So it's logical to think that it's the same person or the same group of people every time, because it's the same thing every time. So I believe in my heart that I have a group of people helping me. I'm only aware of one person in spirit who's actually helping me, but I don't think he's alone. It's a man. I suspect he's a relative. I'm not ready to talk about that yet. I think I know who it is, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to say yet. But it's a man. I get him over there off to my right. And I eventually, so mediumship evolves over time. And what happens to me now, and it's been happening for a long time, is I see people in the room with me. This is in my mind's eye. I see them in my imagination. And this guy showed up one day, but he didn't say anything. And then someone else got my attention. And then the next time I sat down to do mediumship, there he was. And the next time. And so he kept being there. And right away, because in my head, I said, you're not going to say anything. And he'd point and there would be somebody, or he'd point over there and there would be somebody. So he was pointing my attention to people. So he's really helpful now. So for many months, he was always there every time I turned on to do mediumship. And then now what happens is he's not there every single time unless I feel a lot of people in the room with me, and then I'll look over to where he always is and he'll point my attention, and that's a way of narrowing it down. So I think the reason I perceive my little group of helpers as one person, or I only perceive one of them, is because if I did perceive a bunch of people with me, and then when I sit down to do a reading, there's a bunch more people who are the communicators for the client, that would be really confusing to me. So I think it's because it's the best experience for me, having one person saying, look over there, that's why that happens. So I wish someone had told me about this concept, or I had read about it earlier, because I feel like I'm building a relationship with this man. I do want to say, I don't think of him as a gatekeeper. You'll hear that expression, and I think it's an old-fashioned expression, but for me, and this is just my issue with other people's terminology, for me, gatekeeper is someone who keeps people out, or I don't know, it just seems kind of maybe a little bit negative. This man is just there to point my attention to different people in the room. I don't know, so I'm not sure, like I said, who he is. I suspect who he is, but even if it's not the relative that I think he is, I don't need to know his name. I don't need to know his history. I just need to know that he's there to help. And I'm only saying that because I've seen some people get really caught up in, oh, I can't do mediumship, or I can't do it well until I know who my guides are, or until I know their names, or I know all about them. And there are people who have guides, they know their names, they talk about them a lot. That isn't me, doesn't work for me, or it's not something that I'm doing at this time, I want to say. It's not necessary for my mediumship. So I just want to say, don't get caught up in that. If you're aware of someone, just know that they're there to be helpful. And it doesn't matter if you know what they're called or they call themselves. It doesn't matter how they're connected to you or why they're helping you. The fact that they're there to be helpful is really the overriding thing. And I'm not always aware of him. But I was, so when I first became aware of him, he was always there. And now I kind of feel like I'm just aware of him when I've got these multiple people and I need help choosing between somebody. So pretty brief. Next week, so put your questions and comments below. I love that people are doing that, and I will try to do videos answering them. Next week, I'm going to talk about the no takers situation. So that's when you're in a platform or group session, you definitely have someone, you're giving very detailed information about them, and nobody can take it, which will happen. And there's a few reasons why that can happen. So that's next week's video. And thank you for tuning in now, and I will see you then.